Afternoon, everyone. What a privilege to be here. I have to say, it's also very nice to follow Peter Zemsky. I went to INSEAD, and I had the opportunity to be in Fontainebleau a few years ago, and it was an amazing experience. So it's very nice to kind of have that INSEAD connect back. Today, what we're going to talk about is the messy world of decarbonization. Messy, imperfect world of decarbonization. Why do I say that? The fact that we're all here in this event and have been thinking about this topic of decarbonization, it's very clear that the world is going through probably the largest problem that we've had to solve as a humanity together, right? And thinking about the fact that the solution for decarbonizing the world involves a lot of different players and a lot of different actors who have to seemingly make the right decisions at the right time in synchronicity to get to a better outcome to reverse climate change, right? So it's a tough problem. It's hard, but not, it's not impossible. So possible, certainly, but hard. Also very messy and requires us in some ways to accept the imperfections of this journey in ways that maybe we haven't thought about before. So that's what we're going to spend the next 18 minutes talking about. The messy, imperfect world of decarbonization. Okay? With me so far? So, a little bit of introduction about me. I'm Maya Hari. I'm the CEO for Terrascope. Terrascope is an end-to-end decarbonization SaaS platform. We're very focused on using machine learning and data science to be able to transform the decarbonization journey, especially as large companies need to go through this. But it's not the only hat I wear. I'm a technologist. I've been in technology for 23 years. And aside from that, I'm an angel investor. I'm a board director. I'm an urban farmer in my personal life. And I'm most importantly a mother. And I have to tell you, and maybe some of you will share this type of experience with me, my two kids look at me and feel a deep sense of insecurity on what the life will be for them when they're my age. What I am today. And that, to me, has been a big driver for a lot of people, a lot of executives around the world to really feel the need to work in this space as well. So I think that's always the human reason is a very nice grounding for us to keep in mind. Let me frame the problem of messy, imperfect world of decarbonization. The protagonist in our climate change story is carbon dioxide, this seemingly innocuous invisible gas that seems to have the entire planet hanging in a state of anxiety as to whether we will have enough years of stability and climate that we can actually operate in. So in a way, the protagonist also seems like the villain, maybe, in our story. But you also see that carbon dioxide and carbon is fundamental to a lot of our life forms on Earth. It's part of nature, it's part of oceans, it's part of minerals, it's part of our food in a way. So is it really the villain in the story? I would like to reframe the problem that we're tackling as the carbon budget being the real challenge. And I'll explain in a minute why. We think about the budget that we have as a world, experts in IPCC that we all follow have quantified the budget that we have left to about 420 billion tons of carbon dioxide before we hit the 1.5 degree ceiling, beyond which we'll have pretty adverse effects to our climate. Today, at the rate at which we're emitting, we have less than 7 years to make an impact in order to hold against going into very dangerous territories. The good news, because I am an optimist, and you can't survive being in a climate tech world if you're not an optimist, by the way. It's very frustrating. But as an optimist, you see that the scientists actually say that if we're all able to take the biggest industries that are polluting today and invest in decarbonization solutions that are rapid, measurable, and moving the needle forward, even though 7 years, the next decade, we'll be able to do enough, right? It requires all of us to work together. The good news is the single biggest leverage is from companies. We're well organized, right? Industries, governments, we're organized in such a way that we know how to work with incentives and disincentives. So that's the optimistic piece of this problem. But when you talk to executives who have to go down this journey of decarbonization, there is a bit of fear, there's a bit of paralysis to say, I don't know, I have committed to saying that I will get to net zero by 2050, but am I doing the right things? Are we moving forward or are we moving backwards? There is a fair amount of uncertainty. The reason I think why this happens is because the journey to net zero is actually an amalgamation of two journeys. A journey which is a data journey, when you actually get down to what is the path to decarbonization. You take the emissions of a company, you look at all the data inside the company, and you put that together to form a comprehensive view of what direct and indirect emissions look like. And unless you do well in improving the data journey, you're not able to actually make a difference in the emissions reduction journey, which is the second part of this. So you kind of need to move both of those forward. And talk about messy and imperfect, whether you represent a company that's new to the climate decarbonization journey or you are well advanced into this journey, the angst tends to be in the data part of it. I don't know if I have perfect data. I don't know if I'm missing some data. What are the data gaps? I don't know what I don't know, right? And honestly, waiting for perfect data is a fool's errand. So how do we make progress in this journey, accepting the imperfect, accepting the messiness, and still making material progress? There are three areas where I think the messiness exists today. One is the data, which we talked about. Very often at Terrascope, when we profile a customer's data, this is where my team will get applause from customers. And it's so unexpected sometimes. It's when you tell people, this is the data, this is what you're missing, this is what's material to decarbonization, but you're missing, this is where we get the applause sometimes, which is so surprising. The second part is the supply chains. As we all know, supply chains are very fragmented. There are many, many suppliers around the world. You need to start knowing how to make a difference with the select set of suppliers that are really material to your business. You may not have the bargaining power to touch every supplier and be able to get the same information profile from each of them, but you need to know where to focus the attention. And the third piece is really targets and action. Even if a company has set a target at the topmost levels, is the whole organization aligned to what it needs to do in order to get there? And how do you sequence action? The sequencing and focus and priority is actually a very big part of the solution here. So very often, if you take the imperfection in these areas, people say, so what do you do? And my answer generally is, bring data and technology into the mix. And the power of data science has proven very often to be able to help in this scenario. So I want to give you an analogy. Solving the decarbonization puzzle, in my mind, is closest and akin to solving a Rubik's Cube challenge. How many cubers in the audience? Okay, I got one hand. Thank you so much. I am not an advanced cuber. I am a wannabe cuber. Okay, I watch a lot of documentaries about people who do this really well. But if you pick up a Rubik's Cube, there are two ways you could solve it. You could try it like me, slightly ineffective, but like throw yourself into it, try different moves, hope that it'll turn into a good outcome, get frustrated after a few minutes, toss it away, get distracted. Or you could do it like the cubers do, which is actually not knowing whether they will end with a cube that is perfectly colored, so not knowing if they get the perfect outcome. They actually tackle the cube layer by layer by layer. And so starting with the first layer, making progress, going to the second layer. And why I like this analogy for us is we don't exactly know what that path to decarbonization entirely along the way looks like. But we know enough to make material decisions for the first layer. And we can use data science and modeling to actually point us to the how to solve that first layer, and then kind of progress from there. So that's my fun analogy, by the way. This is how I lighten the mood with tough decarbonization talk. But let me tell you a little bit about what we're seeing at Terrascope. It's been an amazing journey in helping companies decarbonize. So we're an end-to-end decarbonization platform. What does that mean to start with? We focus on measurement of carbon footprint, including Scope 3 for supply chains, which is something we spend a lot of time on. But then, much more importantly, we focus on using data science and modeling to build a very ground-up decarbonization pathway that's very specific to the operations of a company, to their supply chain, and all of that. So if you think about what we have seen over the past year is that companies are now using this type of modeling to look at future-forward predictive analytics. So not just to model their decarbonization journey based on what is in their supply chain today, but to actually decide every future decision I make, how do I have a carbon consideration to that decision? So not different from thinking about carbon budget for the world, we're seeing companies really be inspiring in thinking about carbon budget at a very operational level. I'll give you examples of 3 companies that I have personally been very inspired by in our work together. The first is Poca. Poca is a global beverage brand, and they both manufacture beverages, but they also distribute beverages. And when in their journey of exploring their indirect emissions and direct emissions, they found that a big part of their carbon emissions was coming from the distributed part of their, sorry, my slides are slipping a little bit. Give me a second. But a big part of their supply chain, carbon contribution came from a high-selling beverage that was actually something they were distributing. So they were able to actually use the platform and data science to map out 82% of the carbon footprint actually came from the packaging, and only 18% came from the drink itself. And there was a surprising part of the packaging, which was the shrink wrap of the plastic around the packaging, which was the biggest contributor to these emissions. Now, we got to this type of modeling with 92% accuracy without touching any supplier data. So is that perfect? 92 is not perfect. 100 would be perfect. But 92 is good enough to be very specific about what this company needs to do to decarbonize their emissions, right? So it's a great example of turning imperfect into a great action plan. Another company that has really inspired us has been a company called Tectis. They're a Swiss conglomerate in the area of construction design, construction technology, with a large focus on being able to do things that are good for the environment and reduce embodied carbon. And if you know the construction industry and the built environment, it's one of the hardest to decarbonize. And one of the things that they've done is actually looked at alternative technologies and tried to see which one, if they invested in and executed on, would be better for carbon footprint. And so we tested 2 things together. We tested modular construction. So do you know how you build different modular pieces and put a building together in simplistic terms? So if you took the same modular construction and built it with steel versus concrete, what would the outcome look like? And through the power of data science and the platform, we were able to actually immediately pinpoint that if you use steel in the same design, you'd actually have 20% less embodied carbon, which is a great starting point. And if you sourced the steel from a location that was renewable energy positive, better renewable energy mix in the manufacturing, you could actually bring it down to minus 30%. The other technology that we tested for them was thinking about something called as post-tensioning. You know, the concrete slabs that go into building a building. A post-tensioning is a technology that is used in that scenario, and post-tensioning would already bring down embodied carbon by multiple tens of %. And if you throw recycled materials in building that slab in the post-tensioning, you'd actually bring it down by 70%. Phenomenal roadmap, if you will, on where to go and invest in thinking about design and thinking about construction technology as they move forward. The last story I'll leave you with is Mitsubishi's Agri Alliance, which is a company that is an importer and distributor of raw commodities, if you will, agri-commodities. So the scenario in their world is that they actually source from location A, a commodity, and they actually take it to location B and distribute it there, but they also process it in location B. As they did a deeper view on their emissions in their supply chain, they were actually able to assess with the Terrascope platform that you could create a slightly different routing and a slightly different processing location. So you could take the ingredient from A, you could take it to an intermediate location, process there, it's also a shipping port, and then take it to your ultimate destination. Just by changing the routing of the supply chain and the processing location, they would actually reduce emissions in that supply chain by 25%. So, and the interesting part in this one was that not only will they have a carbon benefit, incidentally, they would also have a financial cost reduction. Not always does the financial budget and carbon budget point you in the same way, in the same direction. But when it does, it's honestly magic in sometimes. And so these are examples that have really been inspiring to see how people are using data and analytics and predictive analytics before making a decision. And the power of that is immense. You have much better predictability on what the outcomes will be. You know what the carbon impact's going to be. And you know, essentially, you do a financial budgeting exercise very often, but now you have the ability to also think about carbon budget, but in a way that is very specific to your supply chain, in a way that's very specific to your business. And so the parting thoughts I want to leave you with is that we are on a multi-decade journey to decarbonization. We do have some milestones we have to really think about and be obsessed with over the next few years. But none of this will come if we stay paralyzed because we don't have perfect data yet, or we don't have the perfect scenario, the perfect tools. So embracing imperfection is part and parcel of going down this journey of decarbonization. I think very quick add-on to that is that you have to know what is material to your business versus not. And if you know what's material, that's where you double down, and that's where you aim for improvements. With that, I think you can unlock decarbonization success. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek because success is actually not success yet. It just means that we make progress, because we will know if we're successful when we get to 2050 and we're all comfortable and can exist without changing our clothing and our weather patterns in our homes significantly. I think it takes a village to go down this journey. None of us can actually do it alone. We need the learnings and the inspiration and the stories from each other. We need the tools that each other creates. We need to maybe even collaborate to talk to the common suppliers that we have. So it's thinking about very different world order of how we do business in order to get to this problem. But I think we can do it as a group, as a room here. I invite you to be a part of the village. I ask you to include us in your village, and let's make the next decade count. Thank you very much.